If last week was the pinnacle of passages that I like preaching from, a strange Old Testament story that correlates well with the gospel lesson, if that's the mountaintop, well, I'm at the valley floor this week with the passages that they gave us. They're hard, they're difficult, right? We have a parable that Jesus is describing the dichotomy of wealth inequality in the ancient world. He's talking about this situation, about a poor man and all that he accumulates in terms of the pain and suffering, and a wealthy man, and how even in this instance of death, people aren't going to listen. And I don't read this parable as a description of the afterlife. It's a parable, and Jesus uses really strong language to describe differences between individuals to help us understand the greater message. But it's not a fun message. A message about money, a message that makes us uncomfortable, a message about differences in terms of dynamics, power, wealth, all the different things that often categorize people. And then we have a reading out of Amos. Amos is a prophet. His book is like 7 chapters long. And if you are a fan of Amos, in my opinion, you aren't doing a good job of reading Amos, because he doesn't like you. He does not agree with any of your political ideas or agendas, regardless of what end of the political spectrum you are on. And so this week we have 2 hard passages. What should I do with that? Now, the easy route is for me to preach a sermon on, if you have gifts, give your gifts. And in doing so, we bless everyone around us. But that's a children's sermon, and I already did my children's sermon, and I thought that was a pretty good children's sermon. And this is my second week here, and so I can't do a children's sermon quite yet. Maybe come Christmas when I'm exhausted, but not week 2. And so I got to present something a little bit different. And so I thought about value, the way in which we think about money, especially when it comes to giving, because we can create all these nuances when it comes to giving. We can make the argument, well, who is supposed to give? I mean, if you're in America, you're in the top 40% of the world, and that means all of America should be giving to the rest of the world, because 60% of the world is below us. But that's an asinine comment, is it not? Because I know there are a lot of people that are struggling in America because of the expenditure of what it costs to live in this nation. There are people on the edge, people in need, people camped out on the side of our street who don't have a dollar to their name, right? There's an aspect of people still needing to survive in America. But I also know some people that are in the 0.001% of the world. They have so much money that you don't know what to do with that amount of money. And instead of it being a gift, it's a curse. The way in which they talk about how that money destroys their family, what it does to them, what addictions it causes them to lead to. So much so where I even met someone who took their own life, and their money was their death sentence. And I also met people in third world countries that didn't have anything. Didn't have power, didn't have water, running water, I should say. They didn't have anything, but yet the amount of joy and excitement and love I experienced in that community was something that I wish we all had. They might not have had anything, but they had the fullness of life. So when we talk about these things, it's hard. There's nuances, there's complexity to how we think and how we deal with money and where it should go, because, well, we're humans, and this world is imperfect. And we experience it all differently and in different ways. So I started to think about value. How do we value one another? How do we look at one another? And maybe if we think about value, maybe the world would think about money differently. How do I come to that idea? Thank you for asking. I'm so glad. The book of Amos is where we need to begin. It's a hard book. Like I said before, if you read Amos, he's probably not on your side. Amos is writing during an interesting time in Israel's history. It's kind of at the peak of their power. At this point in time, Israel is separated into 2 kingdoms, a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. And all this happened after Solomon, and it's about 150 years later. And King Jeroboam is reigning over the northern kingdom. And To an outsider's perspective, King Jeroboam seems like a pretty cool dude. I mean, he amasses this army that Israel has never had before. He's able to conquer anyone that challenges him. He expands the northern border. He pushes back Assyria. And on top of that, he creates new trade routes. Trade routes that makes the northern kingdom incredibly wealthy. Wealthy like they have never seen before in their entire existence. Jeroboam, from that standpoint, seems like a pretty good guy. But Jeroboam is an evil king. In 2 Kings, he's described as one of the worst kings, and that's for two reasons. First of all, he enables the worship of other gods. He makes it where he sets up other temples to other gods. He makes Israel walk away from Yahweh himself. He encourages everything that the first commandment says, thou shalt not do. And the second thing is a little bit more uncomfortable. Jeroboam II not only encourages, but fortifies laws around debt slavery. Now, slavery in the ancient world is a little bit different than the way in which we talk about slavery in America, and I want to make that distinction so that way when we're hearing what I'm saying about Jeroboam and the way in which he's thinking, we're not attributing it to our understanding of slavery. It's bad. Slavery around the boards is totally bad. God is all for freedom. That's what Exodus is about, is leading Israel out of Egypt so that they can be a kingdom under God that is free. But debt slavery in the ancient world for Israel meant you were enslaving your neighbor, someone from your own tribe. And the way in which debt slavery happened was because this is an agricultural society, there would be a drought every 3 to 5 years. And if your land did not produce, if you did not have grain in your storage, then you couldn't pay what you owed to the king. You couldn't pay what you had to for whatever the landlord might have been. And so instead of selling your land, which you couldn't do or was the worst, that meant you wouldn't have anything in the future, you would sell your child into slavery. Okay? It's a different animal. It's a different feeling. I'm sorry I brought down the mood. I told you this is the valley. I told you that for a reason. But that's the type of slavery that Jeroboam is inciting. This is the way in which he's personifying this kingdom. And so Amos, when he's mad, he's like, what are you doing? God who freed you out of Egypt so that you might be your own people, and yet you are enslaving your own people, Jeroboam. You are doing this to your own community. You're eating veal. Your bed, your wooden bed, has got mammoth tusks embedded into it. Are you serious? And yet this is how you're treating your people. This is how you value your people. Jeroboam, northern kingdom of Israel, you do not value your own people. And because of that, I have a feeling, Amos says, you will be in exile first. And the uncomfortable thing about Amos is 50 years later, they do go in exile. Assyria comes down and takes all the wealth, all those people away from Israel the first time. It's a sad and it's a hard thing. But it's the reality of what happens when a community does not value its own people. And then when we come to the gospel lesson where Jesus is talking about these different aspects of how can we help one another, he reveals this aspect where if those things don't affect you, then the likelihood of you responding to them is very little. And I'll attest to myself. If something isn't bothering me, the likelihood of me responding to it is not very likely. It's a sinful thing to say, but it's the truth. If it isn't affecting you, it's sometimes hard to feel the need to express something or to respond to something in that regard. So I've been thinking a lot about value, how societies treat one another. Because what happens in ancient Israel still happens today. Was it only 100 years ago where the gulags were created in Russia and most of the people in the gulags, prison camps that died in them, were Russian citizens? And there's an aspect of that happening still today when it comes to the military prowess of how Russia is interfering with Ukraine, or the way in other countries. I won't get any more political than that, but I'm trying to state this event that happened in ancient Israel is still happening today, and I think that's because we do not value human life like God calls us to. And when societies choose not to value your neighbor, the person next to you, when we don't value human life, the unfortunate thing is exile comes, whether you like it or not. And so my prayer, or what I've been thinking the most about, is when it comes to how we react, how we give, how we respond to one another, my prayer is, how are you valuing not just the people next to you, but yourself? How are you valuing yourself? Are you envisioning yourself as a crumpled up dollar, like the one Jack stomped on? And because of that, therefore, you aren't thinking about the person next to you? And you're not viewing them as a whole dollar, as a whole being created in the image of God? Because if you can't value yourself, then it's really hard to value the person next to you. And how do you expect yourself to care about those in need if you're not treating yourself in that manner of value and respect? It doesn't mean we don't look out for those beside us. We're called to love, to be the love and light of Christ in the world. But we have to understand our value and then treat other people that same way. Because if we don't, well, we end up like the northern kingdom. We end up in exile. And that is not what I want for not just this congregation, not just for the United States, not just for the world, but what I definitely don't want for you either. Amen.